r/AskReddit. People who have survived school shootings. What was it like? Serious. I was at UCLA during the shooting in 2016. It was only a disgruntled grad student shooting his advisor and then himself, but we didn't know that at the time. Everyone was assuming it was a mass. I was walking back to my apartment just off campus when the notification went out that there were reports of gunshots and to get inside because campus was locking down. I finished walking home and turned on the news with some friends. I had other friends who were hiding in classrooms. The craziest part was the amount of misinformation going around on social media and in various group messages I was a part of. There were reports of more people shot and multiple shooters in a coordinated attack around various parts of campus and such. I'm not sure how much of that was fabricated maliciously and how much started with someone seeing a plainclothes officer with a gun or something and the story snowballing from there. I called my mom afterward and she started crying. She said she hadn't called me sooner because she didn't want my phone to ring in case I was in hiding. Honestly, really smart of your mom. I'm pretty sure my phone would blow up. Survivor of the SHS shooting here. I was 9 at the time and in 4th grade. I was in the gym and we were just going through the normal routine. That is the gym teacher explaining the activity and us participating. I remember it was rope climbing that day and I was so excited. All of a sudden we heard a loud bang noise and everyone looked towards the door. At first we shrugged it off as the janitor dropping something in the hallway, but after the second and third bangs we were ushered into the corner and told to be very quiet while my teacher ran and locked the doors. We were confused but unbothered at first, but the longer it went on the more worried we became. The loudspeaker crackled on and we heard muffled voices and muffled bangs, then silence. Years later I was told it was our principal and the office staff trying to warn us, but were killed. By now we're all silently sobbing and holding hands. I remember being very scared, but not entirely sure of what. Of course, a school shooting was not the first thing on our minds. Eventually my teacher told us to crawl across the floor and into a supply closet where we sat terrified until SWAT and police officers opened the doors and helped us out. We went out one of the back doors and walked the drive to the firehouse where our parents picked us up and took us home. That experience has changed me forever, and while the effects I had initially, nightmares, anxiety, etc., have lessened, I still feel them. I and many others suffer from PTSD, and I don't think a day goes by where I don't think about it. While I did not know everyone who passed personally, I have seen the toll it took on my community and feel for their families and friends deeply. RIP angels, you are loved. It just hit me that most of you who were in 4th grade then are 16 and will be graduating high school in a few years. Time is going by so fast, but we can't forget this tragedy as the years go by. I'm sorry that this happened to you and your town. Take care of yourself and be as strong as you have been. I was a junior at Newtown High School right up the road at the time. I had only moved to Newtown the summer before, barely 5 months of living in Connecticut, and I remember the school going into lockdown. No one knew why, but we all turned the lights off and sat on the floor of our math class while students looked at their phones. Slowly news reports started rolling in, each one claiming different details and death tolls so nobody knew what was really happening. When we finally came out of lockdown, the principal came on the loudspeaker and said everyone with siblings at Sandy Hook Elementary come to the auditorium immediately, and several of my classmates immediately began to cry. I hardly knew anyone since I was new to the school, but I watched everyone shuffle out of the auditorium as I was walking out the doors and several students were sobbing, held by their classmates. I walked out the front door and there were helicopters circling overhead and police and ambulances screaming past the school. The next several weeks were surreal. People from all over the world sent Christmas trees and teddy bears. Every corner of town had crosses, angels, and candles. My mom was close with the Parker family. Robbie Parker spoke to several news media outlets and was caught up in the conspiracy because people didn't like the way he acted in his interviews, even though he was a nurse, and I saw him cry in private on many occasions after. We ended up babysitting Emily Parker's little sisters one day while her parents were meeting with a counselor. I was playing with Emily's 4-year-old sister when she turned to me suddenly and said a bad man hit Emily with a gun and now she's waiting for us in heaven, and I lost it crying. I had never been so close to such innocent tragic loss of life. I try not to think about what happened, but when I moved away from Newtown I didn't come back for another 5 years because I couldn't break the association of what happened there. So many tragedies have followed that it's hard to imagine any human could do that much harm after witnessing what I saw. Commander Lib, I hope you're doing better now, and I hope you know that me and everyone else in Newtown stood and still stand in solidarity with you and prayed many sleepless nights for your peace and recovery from what happened to you. I haven't thought about what happened there in a long time, but I hope you know that I will never forget it. Stay Newtown strong. Thank you. I'm sorry you had to experience that, and I hope you're doing better as well. Newtown strong. I was a student at Virginia Tech during the 2007 massacre. I wasn't directly in the fire or anything, just a student in the dorms. It was very surreal. That morning my friends and I sat in the dorms watching the news evolve on campus. It started off saying 1 or 2 injured. At that point we didn't make too much of the situation. I remember the newscaster saying at one point that the new updates was over 20 fatalities, the final count was 32, and we all just froze. We assumed it was in error. It was not. As the day evolved we reached out to our friends to make sure they were okay, but cell service was very spotty. I had a very uneasy feeling that a somewhat peripheral friend of mine was in danger and tried to text her. It turns out she was shot, but survived. Another of our friends was shot and killed. The next few days were strange. Classes were cancelled, and many left the campus. President Bush came to speak to us, but I'm sure even he felt helpless with not much to contribute. Eventually, they cancelled the remainder of classes and exams for the semester, and we left for the year. The summer was difficult. At my summer job people kept trying to talk to me about the shooting, both coworkers and customers. I don't know why, but I felt okay discussing it with fellow VT students but nobody else, including my other friends and family. I eventually quit that job and got a new one, not telling anyone I was a VT student. Returning to school felt surreal. We did a lot of school spirit activities at football games, we are Virginia Tech, etc., but it was definitely a different atmosphere. I felt very uncomfortable in lecture halls, and whenever my mind went blank I imagined a shooter coming in and killing us. That feeling still persists sometimes. In large groups I'll start thinking about a mass murder occurring. That day, I'll always say, is the day I grew from a child to adult. I changed in ways both positive and negative. I made new bonds with my fellow classmates, but felt isolated from some other people. It was definitely the defining experience of my young adulthood. For a long time, I didn't want to talk about these experiences with anyone. Now, I try and speak more openly about it, because I'm trying to advocate for a better future. I was around for Elliot Rogers shooting at UCSB. There are a few things that I remember being surprising. 1. The sense of humor. This was not everyone, but I remember a couple people making finger gun gestures at each other. I think this as because the event lasted a while and spread over the Isla Vista area, so there was a general discomfort wherever you were. I think people were coping with the stress however you could. Gallows humor, basically. 2. The awkwardness of trying to console someone who just saw their friends shot, or were shot at themselves. If you have ever been in a social situation where you didn't know what to say, add in the fact that whatever you say might permanently affect the life of the person you are talking to. 3. Your school is now famous for this. Although this was during a time that school shootings weren't super common, so that might be changing. Lived in the same dorm, Manzanita, as 2 of the victims. One being across the hall from my room. Seeing the parents get escorted to their children's rooms was goddamn haunting. During the actual shooting, I was in downtown SB at a birthday dinner. We were getting calls and texts from many of our friends not to come back to the area as it was happening. I hope I'm not too late to get buried here. I was a first responder to Sandy Hook. I was a volunteer paramedic that worked 30+ miles from the school, but was dispatched anyways regardless of the distance and response time, because we were up next once the local EMS crews were out of service. If I had to describe the scene, I'd say life-altering. I thought I had stories to make your skin crawl before Sandy, but now, I can't even come close. The screams of parents and teachers and other students are still burned into my mind. The visual scene. I couldn't close my eyes for weeks without seeing bodies. My short answer? You technically survive the shooting, in my case, the aftermath, but I'll never be the same. I think of myself as my name 2.0. My name 1.0 was pre-Sandy and 2.0 is after. I'm a different person. I'm still in weekly therapy and haven't made any drastic moves towards getting better. Even just seeing this question brought my stomach up to my throat. It's a part of me I'll never be able to explain to anyone that wasn't there, and I don't tell anyone that didn't know 1.0 me because it's too much to put on anyone. My thoughts are with anyone that was involved in a school shooting brave enough to post here. Peace be with you all. Edit. You're all too kind. I'm in a group with the rest of the first responders from that day, and we work through everything together. I don't believe many of us, if any, are still actively volunteering in EMS as a result of this. Also, I'm a lady. Thank you for being there and helping the victims. I go to Saugus High School and was at school during the most recent school shooting that happened 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'll start from the beginning. I got to school at probably around 7:10 because I'm Mormon, so I had a class called seminary, basically Bible study, and so we ended, and I walked to school. I walked in and went towards the back of campus-ish, but I could still see where it took place in the quad. I'm just chilling there with my friends when I look over and see some kid walking really quickly towards the middle of the quad. And it happened so quickly he was crying, I think. He ripped his backpack around, and I just knew there something was wrong. He reached in and shot the girl in front of him. I won't say her name, but I knew her quite well, and she was instantly dead. I'm pretty sure at that point I don't remember much. I just ran, and I ran, and I ran, and I ran, until I collapsed on the sidewalk outside of school and some parent came and helped me up. Scariest moment of my life. I knew the kid that was the shooter. I knew the girl that died. I knew one of the injured. I'm still dealing with it today, and it has honestly made me so scared. A chair fell, and I just sat in my room for a couple hours. I hope no one ever has to deal with anything like that ever. My freshman year of high school 2013, on our first Thursday back after winter break, a student showed up to school late with a shotgun. He walked into his first period class and targeted students who had bullied him. The entire campus was on lockdown for what felt like hours. One thing that has stuck with me was my first period English teacher grabbing a pair of scissors and telling us that he was prepared to do what he had to do to keep us safe. This man was married with kids, but was letting us know in what was probably the scariest experience of his life that he would make the ultimate sacrifice if it meant keeping us safe. Thankfully it never came to that, but it's still hard to imagine what it must have felt like to decide then and there that his students were worth dying for. Your old English teacher is someone who deserves everything great in the world. Wow, you made it to the end. Thank you for watching, mate. Smash that like button and subscribe for more daily content.